All right. Well, let's call the meeting to order for the Special Alcohol Tax Advisory Committee at 8:32 at 9:16.
Kurt, are you all ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're called before we jump into the agenda items. It might be helpful that for everybody to introduce themselves. We have Brandon is going to be our new liaison to this advisory board. We're letting Casey move on to as they reallocate their roles and responsibilities. So this will be Casey's last meeting, and lucky to have Brandon join us. So maybe give Brandon a minute, and then maybe all the board members have an opportunity to just introduce themselves and just a short snippet about themselves or something.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Brandon McGuire. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you. A few of you I think I've interacted with before, and a couple more I'll look forward to getting to know you as we work together. I'm an assistant city manager. I have been with the organization for a little bit over 8 years now. Was actually born and raised in Lawrence, so a very long time resident of Lawrence. And the last several years I've been working with our police department, Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical, Parks and Rec, Parking and Transit. But I've worked with more or less all of our departments in some capacity during my time here as either a liaison out of the city manager's office or working on different projects with those department directors and their staff. So I have a good feel for a lot of the work that's going on with this board and with some of the funding sources that this board oversees. And have actually worked quite a bit with Danny and her team members as well in working on developing our housing initiatives department. And so looking forward to working with the board going forward, and I'm available. I think you all have my contact information available anytime if you need any help from me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Mandy, Dorothy, Dan, you guys want to start here?
I'll go. I'm Mandy Enfield. I work at the United Way, and I've been in Lawrence since '99.
I'm Dorothy. I'm mostly retired. I teach stained glass at the Art Center and in my studio. And I have lived here since 1990.
And my name is Daniel B. Smith. I've lived in Lawrence since I was a little kid. I originally joined this board when I was working at the United Way as the development and marketing person. And now I work over at the health department.
I'm Chris Gohart, local accountant, and I got on this board I think it's 4 years now, maybe. I don't know. I got just re-upped for another session of this. So been in Lawrence since 1998 and really like participating in these boards. I think they're valuable and can be incredibly effective in of helping move the community forward for sure. I think that's all the board members here, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I noticed that we didn't, before we get into the first agenda item, I noticed that we didn't have the approval of the prior meeting minutes. Do we not have those available to approve, or we need to add that to an agenda to have those approved?
This is Brandon McGuire. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but we did not have minutes ready when we posted the agenda. So I will follow up on that and make sure it's ready for the next meeting. So I apologize about that. The video recording is still available online. And so anybody with, who wants to go back and view that meeting between now and the next meeting of the board can certainly do that, but we'll make sure those are on the next meeting for approval of the board.
Okay. Appreciate that. So the first agenda item that we have, we're just kind of an update on the fiscal year 2022 budget, and also, kind of where we fell on the 2023 budget, specifically kind of how that it's affecting this board, and whether there is recommendations that we'll be making to the City Commission in the upcoming fiscal year.
So again, this is Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. And I invited Danny Walters and a couple of her team members, Cicely Thornton, and I'm not sure if Jen Mosley is on yet or if she's going to be joining us, but at least Danny and Cicely are with us. And that, as you know, is the team that is making use of this 1/3 of the special alcohol funds and working on some of our strategic goals related to development of capacity in our homelessness response system. And so I know that the 2022 budget included an $800,000 allocation to the homeless initiatives or the housing initiatives team. And I've asked Danny to kind of be prepared to give a brief update on the status of that funding for the year. And then also the 2023 budget, which was just adopted by the City Commission, includes, and Danny, correct me if I'm wrong, but an additional $800,000 for the programs that we're working on developing within the homeless initiatives or the housing initiatives team. And
yeah,
so
Danny Walters, that's correct.
Yeah, so Danny, if you're prepared, maybe go ahead and walk the board members through kind of a status update of the 2022 budget and a little discussion about 2023. And I believe you're set up to be able to share your screen if you need to do that.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Danny Walters, and like Brandon said, I am the Housing Initiatives Division Manager. Cicely from our homeless programs team is here as well, and I don't know if Jen was going to be able to join or not. We've got quite a bit going on in the community right now with some things that we're responding to, so she may or may not be able to join us. But I'm going to share my screen, and I just put together a real quick overview of the 2022 funding. And I can say that for 2023, it's not exactly mapped out yet, like 2022 is at this point. We are still working with the KU needs assessment and working on some different projects. So that will be forthcoming. But my assumption is that it will look very similar to what we have for this year. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And I assume everybody can see this okay?
Good. Yeah, we can see that. Perfect.
Okay. This is just for the special alcohol fund with the 800,000. This shows that we had 17,152 that went to the care center. And that was for the safe bar training, which has been a staple from this and will continue to going forward. Burton Nash Community Mental Health Center for their homeless services. The Lawrence Community Shelter, we are working on a final agreement for their second half of the funding currently, and that's included in there. And then we had also at the beginning of the year set aside funding for winter emergency shelter, which the city will be administering again this year. And then as some of you may know, we have been working with trying to work with the camping situation that's happening in our parks and in the downtown area. And this camp project line item is going towards that temporary camping solution that we're looking at. We are looking at longer term solutions for that. However, this is kind of what we're looking at now. And then as you can see, there is still a remaining amount that we are looking at based on the assessment of needs that KU did, and then also our strategic plan. And so that information will be forthcoming. And I'm happy to answer any questions about any of these. And Cicely is here also to speak about anything that our homeless programs division is working on.
This is Chris Cohart, Chair. And we've kind of gone around and round about pre this meeting about just the allocation to city funds, and I understand the city has that has that right to do that. They don't have to listen to the advisory committee. But one thing for the winter shelter and the camp project funding, in Ordinance 33, it does speak very specifically about this 1/3 allocation that has to be the special alcohol and drug programs that, what the Kansas statute requires. And then, obviously we as a city have exempted ourselves from that, but put in language that we are supposed to follow. How do those two particular programs speak to the items that we do say that can be utilized for that 1/3 funding relating to special alcohol and drug programs?
I think that there has been direct correlations that have been made between alcohol and drug use and addiction and being homeless and not having a stable environment to be in. So these are both speaking to that on the street portion. And what they're able to do is to be able to not only take care of the community, but also give them a venue to be linked to services that directly work with some of these behaviors.
Brandon,
I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
So there will be people there that are trying to work with them in the camps, to work with them to try to get them services to help to get rid of their addiction is what we'd like.
Yes, absolutely. That is one of the main benefits of being able to do this type of project, is that we are able to assist the case managers that are working with this population that have these situations in their life going on, that they know where to find them, that they know that they can go speak to them. And then also our staff has been doing a lot of work working with those that are camping and getting them connected to those proper services. So we're working on keeping a by name list and really knowing who that population is. So it's not just a tent, we actually know who these folks are and what their stories are. And that is helping to facilitate connecting them to services.
But are we helping to fund those groups that are working with them, or?
Oh, there is some funding involved in that from us. Yes, there's multiple funding because it's multiple agencies that we're working with.
Could we know who they are and the amount of funding?
Well, the Burt Nash Homeless Outreach Team, which we're funding, is part of those. Sometimes it's as simple as it's some of the agencies that are local that have already been working with that person.
But they're not receiving funds from the city, are they?
Well, sometimes it's the shelter that's going out.
Like shelter and Burt Nash, but not like DECA or any drug treatment programs.
Those are typically the referral after the case managers are seeing them and the outreach teams are seeing them.
So I, like Chris said, I know that the ordinance has loopholes and there's no like real clear guidance on these funds, but it is really, the language is really heavy on prevention. And the money is to be used for prevention or treatment. That's pretty clearly stated in the ordinance as the intention, and it's heavy on the prevention side. So I think that as this board, I would advise that the funds be used for prevention or treatment versus direct like homelessness. That's more of an indirect route to drug abuse treatment and prevention. So I spent some time on the ordinances last week and I can't remember everything, but I think that I would like to say as a board member, I'd want that on the record.
This is Chris Gohart, Chair. I would agree. I think it definitely speaks to preventing and intervening on drug and alcohol abuse. But there is kind of, as most good ordinance already have a catch-all, so that 2G kind of allows a pretty broad usage of it. But I agree. I think the core of what we're trying to accomplish with that 1/3 funding from the state is truly intervention and prevention of drug and alcohol abuse. So I'd like to make sure that in future applications and uses, for sure, that's a pretty important, that's a pretty big piece of the pie of, I mean, when they're doing the applications or where we're determining who's getting funding, how are they actually, how are they accomplishing that goal with the spending that we're authorizing? And in a direct manner, just like Mandy said, not necessarily indirect manner.
Hi,
Daniel,
this is, okay, sorry.
Yeah, I'll just go really quickly. Daniel B. Smith. I kind of want to echo Mandy's sentiment. I definitely, well, first of all, in these meetings, I always say that, you know, the programs that are being funded here, I wholeheartedly think that they are important to the community, and, you know, do agree that they're connected to, you know, drug and alcohol usage in some manner. But I also feel like anybody who's worked in social services for a while begins to, you know, knows right off the top of their head that a lot of these different things are connected. So, you know, if we're talking about drugs and alcohol, you can very easily connect that to housing or employment, poverty in general. And it's really easy to make those connections and justify things. But I definitely agree that the prevention and treatment seems more specifically mentioned. And to me, I agree that I would generally advise that the funds should be used. You know, it's more like spirit of the law versus letter of the law. I feel like the funds should be used in that way, even though I think these other programs are also worth funding, potentially through other means. But I would like to just reground this conversation in the fact that, you know, the input that we're having right now, or you know, us saying that we would advise the funds be used in that way is a little bit wonky, because ordinarily we would be providing that input prior to the allocation of funding as opposed to after the fact. So we're now like after doing like post-mortem input, which is backwards. And so in addition to our specific opinions about how the funding has been used and what we advise, I'd like to also just comment on the nature of us giving our input and how that has been, you know, sort of flipped, and which is something we've talked about in multiple of these meetings, but just can't help but point out the fact that we are talking about our advice for the funds, which have already been allocated, which is in itself worth talking about.
I appreciate that, Dan.
This is Chris Comer, Chair. I agree. I think that part of what I was thinking is, you know, as we move forward, one of the suggestions for us is those applications, how we're making the determination of who's being funded moving forward. There's a clear, direct path towards prevention and intervention of drug and alcohol abuse, and I think direct is pretty vital. So. I know we're just an advisory committee, so we can only advise, but that's for sure what, like Dan said, I think the spirit of the allocation from the state for these funding source, this funding source.
DLB Smith, and you know, as far as, you know, how this group operates, you know, if it is important for the city to get those funding allocated earlier, I think all of us would be more than amenable to, you know, do special sessions, change the calendar up, and make sure that things are ordered in a way that, you know, our input is not holding up the city's ability to move quickly or get things on the schedule as needed. Just wanted to throw out that I think all of us are flexible and eager to accommodate whatever schedule the city needs as far as making sure that process doesn't get held up based on our input.
Chris Garth, this is Chair. I agree. So let's talk more about that in the next agenda item. And if anybody has any other questions about the 2022 usage or how it's going to be allocated further, let's do that. Or otherwise, we'll move on to what it looked like for fiscal year 2023. But leave 2022 open for now. I do have one about the remaining 150,000. Is that
I'll wait
Is
till
that something that-
2023. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. The remaining budget of 150,000, is that something that the city has a plan for utilization in the current year with the last 5 months, or is that something that there is an intention to carry that forward into the 2023 budget?
This is Danny Walters. It is likely that we will be looking at some type of RFP for it. But my thought is that there's a good possibility that it could move forward to 2023, just because of the time we're at in the year right now. So.
Anybody else have anything further on 2022? It's Chris Gohart, Chair.
Nothing more than just repeating what we've said for the last year, that, you know, it's come to the end of the year and there was no plan with these funds. This decision was made before the needs assessment was available, and now it's the end of the year and the funds haven't been allocated, and they could have been used for these nonprofits. I mean, like, it would still be disappointing, but even as a transition year, you know, to give them some funding instead of just carrying these dollars over when there was no plan at all as to how we were going to use them. They were reallocated and now they just sit. And that's a real bummer.
All right, well, Danielle, Cicely, thank you for the 2022 fiscal year presentation, and let's kind of talk about what 2023 looks like. Partly what Dan is saying is how we as an advisory board kind of create our agenda for next year. It's good to understand kind of what the expectation of the funding sources are going to be for 2023, and then we'll move into kind of how we view us as part of a solution related to these funds going forward.
Danny Walters, as I had mentioned, we are still looking at utilizing these funds for street outreach, for sheltering, and for really that piece of assistance in helping to get folks from the streets and into housing. And that looks, you know, that kind of can take a variety of different looks. Winter sheltering is also going to be a critical piece of 2023 moving forward too. The city did put out an RFP for winter shelter services, and we did not get any responses for it. So it has fallen back on the city to administer. So we want to make sure that we're administering it to the greatest extent of being helpful to the folks that are utilizing it. We plan on within the next couple of months, you know, looking more at that 2023 piece and getting it settled as we are digging deeper into that needs assessment and figuring out kind of where our focuses need to go.
This is Chris Gohart. So is kind of the expectation, you said earlier that there's 2023 had another allocation of about $800,000 approximately. So is the expectation kind of our starting point is a very similar funding of the similar organizations as kind of our starting point for 2023? Or is there another process where people are going to have an opportunity to show the city how they can participate in the initiatives that the city has as it relates to these funding, these funds?
This is Danny Walters. I would anticipate it. I would anticipate us looking at the categories and looking at who is providing those services and moving from that spot on. So we are looking at some different funding opportunities for some other enhancements to some of the programs, and that might change some of the funding needs. as like I said, as we're looking through that needs assessment, I know one thing that's popped up in that needs assessment and really in the community is a need for family sheltering and family services for those that are homeless. So I think that's going to be something that we're going to be looking really strongly at as well.
And this is Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. I might jump in and add a little bit from my perspective, which is just that what we're working on, and we're doing this in partnership with the county and with the service providers within the continuum of care. What we're really working on and talking about is development of the capacity within our homeless response system, capacity that is severely lacking to meet a need that, through our strategic planning process was identified as one of the top 3 most important things to this community, to the Lawrence community. And so with $800,000, and you're talking about sheltering and outreach and rapid rehousing, we really need many times that amount. And so I think, to set the expectation that there may be substantial funding available for other types of programming, I don't think is a fair expectation to set. I do want to be clear that it's very likely that outreach and sheltering is going to pretty easily eat up the vast majority, if not all, of this $800,000 in 2023. And I think it probably could have in 2022, but we had committed to leaving some funding available in order to try to be more immediately responsive following the receipt of the KU needs assessment study. And so I do think that the way that we'll go about spending these funds in 2023 will be pretty similar. It's a procurement basis as opposed to a grant basis. So, on a procurement basis, the city, through our assessment and our strategic goal setting, identifies what sort of services we need to procure in order to make progress on those goals. And we go to market through a competitive solicitation or through a sole source vendor agreement to be able to purchase those services. And so, very likely continuation of our sheltering and outreach agreements and trying to also build some additional capacity where we have pretty significant gaps in our service provider community.
Daniel B. Smith here. I just wanted to chime in. I feel like so far, you're talking about 2023. There's been a lot of discussion of the work that is proposed or the issues in the organizations, the initiatives that are potentially going to be funded. And for us, or at least I'll just speak for myself. For me, I certainly don't need to be sold on any of these things. I've slept at the winter shelter. I've done a lot of that work. I think for us, the big question isn't so much what's going to be funded, where the city sees that money going, and more about the process and where we fall in the process. I would be more than happy to, advise anybody to support the winter shelter effort or similar things. But, just talking over the potential funding and the potential allocations, I'm not hearing any part in that process for us to give input or have a meaningful impact. So I'm just wondering, as opposed to this year, for 2023, how are we expected to be involved? All of us are volunteering our time to do this work, and I'm just curious what sort of impact we could have, how our input would be utilized.
This is Chris Cohart, Chair. I would agree with that. I do have, so part of our role in our ordinance and our bylaws here is to ensure that the funds are being used appropriately, right? And I don't disagree that the programs and the things that have been funded with these funds have merit and support all of those items. But it is pretty clear as to what these funds should be utilized for, this 1/3 allocation to special alcohol and drug abuse. And I view that we can move on to agenda item 2 because there's no vote or anything for this, but I do think there's somewhat of a role for us to ensure as a Special Alcohol Tax Advisory Committee to ensure that some of these funds are being utilized within the ordinance that has clearly been specified. And funding of these particular programs have merit, but is this the right place for these funds to be taken from? Or should this be utilized in a different way because of how clearly it states what these funds will be used for? And like I said, the ordinance is very clear. We're not following the Kansas statute as it relates to the usage of these funds. We've written our own. But from the very beginning of this, that was one of the first questions we have is whether the ordinance supports the usage of this. And is there an ordinance change that's going to occur as it relates to this? So yes, how are we moving forward? And I do have some ideas as it relates to this, especially how what our ordinance speaks to. Maybe it's the bylaw. I don't remember which one it was.
Chris, I just want to say, we have the ordinance that says that its goal is that we don't have to follow the state ordinance. But I was looking at that and it's pretty similar. It's not a lot different either. It's because the state ordinance is confusing. There's no distinction between the 3 different things. So
this is great. I agree. It's very similar. It's probably a little bit more broad as to what we state as a city is going to utilize, but I agree 100%. They're very similar in terms of usage. The core of what the funds are supposed to be used for in our ordinance is very similar to what the Kansas statute states. So before we kind of go in, so do we have any other questions or questions for Danielle or Cicely about the 2022 usage, or kind of what the intended goal is for 2023 funding? And we can let them go if they want to, and we can move on to agenda item 2.
Chris, if I may, I might offer an observation.
Sure, absolutely. It's Chris.
Okay, thank you. Brandon McGuire, Assistant City Manager. I do want to say to the point that the board members are making about the appropriateness of the use of these funds. We are compelled by law to use these funds appropriately, and so if when the City Commission was considering the decision to use the funds in this way, before that decision was made, we had legal review to make sure that it is an appropriate use of the funds. I don't have a written attorney opinion to show you at this point, but if our city attorney had any concerns that this was an illegal use of the funds, which I believe is the board members' concerns, then certainly the City Commission would not have been advised that this is an appropriate use of the funds. In fact, we would have cautioned them against doing that so that we're not in violation of our own ordinance. So that's not to discredit or to I guess shortcut any discussion about how the funds can be used. It's just to say that I would have grave concern if we did have a policy or law violation within our budget and the City Commission was misguided in making that decision about the use of these funds.
Brandon, could you help me then? Because I spoke at commission a while back and asked, and I think I've emailed and asked to hear what the legal review, the city attorneys say about this. And I was told that the commission did not request for an attorney to review it after my request. So not previous to the funds being used, but recently. And I think in that context, if that had happened, it would have been cool for somebody to say, we did review this and these are the findings.
Yeah.
So could you help me connect those 2 pieces?
Sure.
The comments that it wasn't reviewed and that they don't need to review it.
This is Chris, but Brandon, before you have a chance to Do we need Danielle or Cicely any longer? Because we don't want, if they don't have to stay on the meeting, we'll let them kind of scoot out. We can call this agenda item number 2 and kind of close out agenda item number 1.
Great. The only other thing I would say, and just while Danny's on, she can confirm this, that we could bring our, so when we prepare like an RFP, a request for proposals, or some sort of competitive solicitation like that, there's always going to be a scope of work involved, and so we could review that, and Danny's team could bring that forward for the board's review and feedback prior to a solicitation for the 2023 funds. So I just wanted to offer that while Danny's still on, she could confirm that.
Yes, we can absolutely do that.
To review the RFP language?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, this is Chris Gore, Chair. I don't think, from my perspective, I think there's a difference between whether we can legally do something and whether the core of the law states that. And 2G of our ordinance allows a pretty broad usage of those funds. So I'm not an attorney, but from a legal perspective, I think you could get there pretty quickly to say that we are within the law to spend the funds as it states in the ordinance, but just by 2G, because it is so broad and catch all. I think appropriateness still goes back to how are we having a direct tie to the services that we're providing in the usage of these funds. Mm-hmm. I think that's the core of 2A through F is direct services of prevention and intervention. Mm-hmm. So that to me is more about the appropriateness of it. It's not legality of it. It's mm-hmm. the appropriateness and adhering to kind of what the core of what these users fund for direct intervention and prevention. So,
and Chris, I think we forgot, and if you guys don't think this is relevant, let me know. But it wasn't just the use of the funds, but the loophole of you can bypass the advisory board if the funds are used by a city department. And that was my first hang up on this, because I strongly believe that when the ordinance says city departments, it's being specific, it's specifically referencing the city departments that are listed in the other ordinance. It's not saying like just any city department, so that was the other legal piece that I was concerned about, and I totally forgot about in this conversation, but I just want to throw that out there. And also when I asked Finkeldye, there was some mention of, well, we'll just change the ordinance, so I'd be interested in what that process looks like, how an ordinance is just, if it doesn't serve what the commission and city staff wants, you just change it. Like, is there a process around that? We could go to public comment, whatever, but it just seems like.
This is Casey Toomey. There are several advisory boards who have worked on recommended changes to their ordinances, if that's what you're asking, Mandy.
So we would be involved in that process?
I believe the email that you're talking about with Commissioner Finkeldye, that was his point, was that if the board believes there should be changes to that ordinance, the board is certainly within your purview to draft recommended changes to that ordinance. And in fact, this board had been working on some recommended changes to language in the ordinance. So that was my interpretation of the email that you're referring to.
Our ordinance changes were outside of the context of the new information. We did that before the funds were switched to homelessness, so we tabled it.
This is Chris Gard. Yeah, that's right. It was more of updating language in the ordinance to speak more to current language as it relates to the alcohol and drug abuse, as opposed to the process of advising the city commission on the usage of the funds.
This is Casey Toomey. Agreed. I was simply trying to illustrate the process would be the same.
So one thing I was noting, this is Chris Gard, Chair, kind of to Mandy and Dan's point about the process and us moving forward and what our role is with these funds. The ordinance 9726 does say, give us the quote unquote loophole about the usage of city funds, but kind of section C, 3C says that we evaluate the use of city funds by recipients and report to the city commission on any such findings and determinations as the board determines appropriate. That doesn't split the funding. That just speaks to the usage of city funds as it relates to these. It doesn't say, like in 1A, what we've advised, not counting the money that the city departments are using. So I do see, based off of this charter, that we have a role and responsibility to review the usage and the reports that these funds have been utilized for, and provide our same annual report to the city that we normally would on the appropriateness of the usage of these funds as it relates to the city ordinances. And it doesn't kind of go back to where we initially had. It's more, like Dan said, more post-mortem of, hey, were these used the way it's supposed to be used? But I do think reading the ordinance 9726, we do have some responsibility moving forward on reporting and a kind of evaluation of the funding, the usage of the funds. And then I would also ask, all board members here is let's find a way, looking at the strategic plan. I know Mandy spent a ton of time reviewing this strategic plan, where we fit, how we view ourselves fitting into that strategic plan, kind of in a forward-thinking way. I don't want to be post-mortem. We want to be part of a solution, and it's hard to be part of a solution on a post-mortem basis. So maybe at the December board meeting, we have some items from the strategic plan, and we love staff's help as well of where they view this board fitting into the strategic plan as well, because it's not always just us throwing stuff at the wall and say, hey, we want to do this, you want to do that. Maybe there is a role that you guys see us playing in a more forward-looking way to be part of a solution. Maybe
well, I'm sorry. I have heard, and if this is true, that's fine. But I've heard that there's going to be some major restructuring of advisory boards too, and they're working on that. But does that mean we can't have any input on it? Or, I mean, if this board is going to be dissolved or absorbed into other boards, then fine. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to waste time trying to figure out what our role would be if somebody else has another plan and our input isn't going to be important. Does that make sense? I mean, do we have input in what our future of our board, or what else we can do to help with the city in our quest to help with drug addiction? What can we do? What input can we put in and suggestions that would be actually listened to?
Mm-hmm.
This is Chris Gart, Chair. I think that's a very fair question. I think before we ask the volunteer board to put in more time and effort to find out what our role is for 2023, I'd ask staff, like, is there an intention that this for 2023 that this board would be absorbed by other boards, or the roles and responsibilities of this board would fall on someone else?
Yeah, and that's sort of been ambiguously communicated too. So, it's like, oh, we're going to do a board restructuring or board consolidation, whatever. And but then it's like, when are we really? We don't know. So it just really makes it hard to be forward thinking and proactive.
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. Any work that the staff would do. So let me actually back up. So advisory boards really fall within the realm of the city commission. The city staff, obviously, we serve as liaisons. We try to, help provide administrative support for the boards and some subject matter expertise to assist with your work. But advisory boards and committees really fall under the city commission's purview. So any work that we would do, that the staff would do on in developing recommendations or changes to the advisory boards would come in the direction of the city commission. So they have not, the city commission has not directed any of that work at this point. I know, like Casey mentioned a couple minutes ago, several advisory boards have taken it upon themselves over the last year or two to look at their own authorizing ordinances and proactively make recommendations to the city commission about their kind of their scope and their purview. But in terms of the city commission making any specific directions about changes to any advisory boards, we've not received that yet.
Are any of those boards that have made these recommendations comparable to our situation, that we could look at their like model our activities after theirs if they've been successful?
Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. I think the two that come to mind immediately are the Community Police Review Board, which I would say is probably not, a comparable function, comparable purpose. And then I believe the Sustainability Advisory Board, no, the Human Relations Commission has done some of that work as well. That may be somewhat comparable in making recommendations about if city changes to city code and city policies around like housing discrimination issues and other types of discrimination issues, and how to protect against those for our protected populations.
This is Chris Coart, Chair. Yeah, I think I watch every commission meeting. Unfortunately, I like to consume all the city's information. I'm usually one of two that's watching every one of these things. I've seen a lot of the boards make the transitions or make some proactive changes. I think the difference in those boards and ours is fully contingent on a specific amount of funding. And then once you cut that funding in its entirety, the advice that we're supposed to be providing has also then been mitigated by a significant amount, just based off of what our role has been. I mean, I think we could very clearly make a change to our city ordinance by cutting out the one line that gives you some loophole and saying, other than internal city funds, departments. And then that puts us right back to where we were previously, where we're part of the process and helping determine, and whether it's an RFP like it was in the past in a grant or a procurement process, it's still on the front end, helping advise, who's the right people to be moving the needle as it relates to homelessness specifically, and the drug and alcohol prevention side of things. Otherwise, I think you're changing the entire core of what this advisory board was built for, and you're kind of starting from scratch as to what our defined role is. The other ones are just kind of a slight pivot, but they weren't dealing with funding. It's just different advisory that they're providing, not necessarily an allocation perspective. So, we happily go back to looking at what our ordinance is and updating the language as we previously had proposed to make it more current, what the terminologies are, and eliminating that one section that has city department funding. Does anybody have Dan, you have anything you want to speak to as it relates to moving forward that you haven't already conveyed?
DMB Smith, nothing too specific, but I do definitely agree that, in addition to being willing to accommodate the city and try and, make our role in the process easier, fit in with the, scheduling, I'd also like to agree that I would be interested in, potentially talking about revisions to the ordinance. We do have the clause surrounding the 30% for treatment and recovery, and it's never really been a stated goal of this group to actually discuss whether or not we feel like that 30% is, what it should be. We just that we're given. Do I personally feel like that is where that funding should go, that 30%, or do I agree that the housing is more of an important issue? I feel like for me, that's really kind of outside of my role on this advisory board. I'm just essentially trying to fulfill the stated goals of the ordinance. And if the city wants that ordinance to change, I might not even be specifically opposed to that, but I think a lot of the question marks and ambiguity is really what's just throwing us for a loop as far as not being sure what the point of our convening is. But I think we're all open to having the discussions to move things forward. Ultimately, I think we just want to see that this funding be used, but in a way that is strategic and has positive impacts for the community. But I don't have any other specific inputs. I'm just curious to see what some concrete next steps could be. Also, I'm not sure how many of the staff are still on the call, whether some folks have popped off, but of course, I'm always just very appreciative of the staff time. And I'd also like to throw this out there that I realize that Brandon's coming into this new role where things are changing, and I've seen a lot of that at the municipal level, and I know that those transitions can be difficult. So we appreciate you, and yeah. So I just think trying to keep things open to potentially changing or being modified. I don't think any of us are dead set on keeping things 100% the way they have been in the past. If that's not working, or if there's evidence that that's not what's best for the community, if there's clear evidence that the funding should be used in a different way, I think that we can incorporate that into what we do, and still be involved in the process. Or if there is, if the board were to be absorbed or dissolved, those. If we agree that those things are best for the community, that's ultimately, I think, what our focus is. So just trying to make it clear that we're not trying to hold anything back or prevent anything positive from happening if it can be really shown to us that whatever change is being enacted is actually what's going to be best.
Chris Gord, I would agree with that 100%. Well said. Dorothy, you have anything further as it relates to kind of discussion of the role of the board going forward?
Basically what everybody said. I mean, why are we meeting if we don't have anything to advise, or we don't have anything to do? I mean, if they want to give us some different duties to take care of, like before, suggesting allocations for the funds, that's obviously gone away. If they want to give us other kind of roles, then fine. But otherwise, I mean, this is only my third meeting, and I feel like, well, there isn't much going on. And I just also want to say, I think the homeless problem and fixing people is very, very important. I mean, this is really a crisis that we've had, and not just in Lawrence, but all across the country. And I just feel like, though, we also have to, and I know that resources are limited. That's the sad part. But we also have to remember that we can't, well, a friend of mine did an analogy of, we can't just keep pulling people out of the river. We have to go upstream and figure out why the heck they're falling into the river. And so, the prevention part, I'm not sure in the past how much you did in prevention, but to me, the prevention part is to work on programs that keep kids in the beginning to even start having drugs and having alcohol problems. And I wish we had all the funding that we wanted to do all that stuff, but I understand that sometimes the most important thing right now is saving those people who are homeless. So but I just want to know what we're going to do. Yeah. And how I can help.
Agreed. So at this time, I think we can be done with agenda item 2. The only thing I would ask of staff is kind of a couple of things. What Mandy's question about her when she spoke at the city commission meeting, what was conveyed to her was that a legal review had not been done on this, and just making sure that we follow up on what Mandy's question was initially on that. And 2, and maybe I'm missing another one, but I'd kind of like just staff's opinion or about what I was mentioning about Ordinance 9726, Section 3C, as it speaks to our role still reviewing and evaluating the usage of those funds that are part of this 1/3 special alcohol tax state funds. Is there anything else that I'm missing that we would ask of staff for the next meeting? Nothing. Okay, so move on to public comment. So just an opportunity for anybody at City Hall or on Zoom to make public comment in any of the listed agenda items, and public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have anybody on site or on Zoom for public comment?
Chris, we do not have anybody in the room and nobody else on Zoom.
Okay, so we'll close public comment at this point and move on to the fourth agenda item is calendar, and our next meeting is scheduled for December 16th at 8:30. Does anybody have any objection to leaving that as December 16th or canceling that one as it currently is scheduled?
As usual, I'm reluctant to give up any meeting opportunities because they're hard to get.
Dorothy, Dan, any objection to leaving as is?
DLB Smith, I have no objection to that. I don't know off the top of my head, but in general, I make these things work. So
I put it on my calendar so I don't schedule something else. So
yeah, well, I agree with Mandy that I'd rather keep it on, and if we have to adjust it as we get closer, that's great. But I do think, I'd really like to become armed with, maybe by then we have an idea of, if the city commission is making a recommendation to consolidate some boards, and if that's the case, then we'll make the appropriate adjustment as it relates to that meeting. But if we don't have anything, what I would definitely like to talk about is maybe revisiting. Mandy, do you still have all that previous language we were proposing for the city ordinance? Are we revisiting that
from when we way back in May, or
yeah,
a million years ago? That stuff. Yeah, we still have that somewhere.
Okay, yeah. Maybe we revisit that at the next meeting and then speak to kind of anything further in that city ordinance that we might want to look at, so we can be part of a solution and forward looking and helping the city as part of the strategic plan moving forward, and making sure that, Dorothy's point, where we have something that we're responsible for and we're doing it, and we're not just volunteering our time to talk to each other. We could probably do without a public forum if we want to. So
sounds good.
Do we have anything from staff, that any final comments or questions that you have for this advisory board before we adjourn?
No, none from me.
None from me.
I appreciate Danielle and Cicely's. Have I been saying your name right, Cicely, if I said it?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for your time today and the presentation and the work you've done within the city and allocating these funds. It's definitely valuable, and all of us believe that homelessness is an important thing to fund. So we appreciate what you're doing. And Casey, thank you for putting up with us all this time, and hope you get a little breather or something. It's not just one work on top of work. And Brandon, welcome. We're happy to have you and looking forward, hopefully in the next couple of years, having some very good conversations about strategically how we're moving the city forward with what the city's plans, city commission and city staff's plans are.
Yeah.
With that, I'd make a motion or entertain a motion to adjourn. I do that right on Robert's Rules of Order.
Mandy Enfield, so moved.
Daniel B. Smith, I will second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any objections to adjourning? Hearing none, we'll adjourn the City Commission Special Alcohol Tax Advisory Board meeting at 9:32. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.